Today we're going to be covering 8 things you didn't know about 007 Goldeneye for the Nintendo 64. Coming in at number 8, we're going to be talking about the blood spray. According to an article by NGC Magazine, issue 60, released in November of 2001, a developer who wished to remain anonymous at the time said, "Our first shooting demo was a bit of a laugh. The effect of the bullet hit was not a million miles away from someone shaking a ketchup bottle on the inside of the television screen." Following that, we decided to keep the blood low-key. Bond films are not noted for their multiple eviscerations or lots of violent deaths. Nintendo would go on to request for different versions of red, green, orange, and even bright blue blood. But upon seeing how truly awful all the other options looked, they eventually agreed to Rare's use of small amounts of red blood. We can see here in the back of the GoldenEye box that there were definitely some different blood splatters being used. Another interesting fact is while characters when shot do have a small amount of red tint applied to them, where the bullet hits, the actual impact is what produces the sparks. This on low resolution could definitely confuse some players into thinking that this was in fact a blood splatter. When a bullet hits a character, it will apply the same sparking effects as if it hit a wall or any other surface. This has to do with the fact that the effect was tied to the bullet itself and not what it hit. Number 7. The Wii Remake. Fans have been foaming at the mouth for a long time for a solid Nintendo 64 remake of 007 Goldeneye, and it's always strange to me how few people realize that it's actually already happened. In 2010, for the Wii, a modern reimagining of the 1997 Nintendo 64 game was released. There were, however, some significant differences. Daniel Craig now replaced Pierce Brosnan as Bond, with tweaks to the campaign to make it fit with the storyline of the movies that were going on at that time. However, naturally, since it was a 2010 title and on a much newer system, additional gameplay features were implemented. These included better graphics, AI bots were now a lot more dynamic and challenging, and you could even use the Wii Zapper to peer around corners. It goes without saying that I must mention the inclusion of destructible environments. The Wii version allowed for local 4 players as well as up to 8 players online. While there are some definite changes here, overall it is a title that GoldenEye fans need to visit at least once because it's clear a lot of love went into the development of this game and trying to make it match the original as closely as possible while still building upon it with modern systems. Number 6. All the Bonds. In an interview by Now Gamer with some of the developers from the original GoldenEye team, we learned from Dave Doak the following. Right near the end of development, a guy came in from EON who owned the Bond license and saw that we had put Connery, Dalton, Moore, as well as Brosnan into the game. We thought it would be great for marketing and even had some screenshots that went out with Connery in his white tuxedo. Then an edict came down from above that we had to get rid of all the other Bonds. So on that day that we had to take them out, we first played an epic deathmatch. First to 100 kills, which went on for about 3 hours. Mark Edmonds played as Moore and won by 1 kill. When we actually look at the code, there is unused code in the game that would have enabled players to select the Bonds that they would like to play as before the mission started, but only for the bonus missions of Aztec and Egyptian. In multiplayer, the code shows that all 4 Bond actors would have been available. It is worth noting that there seems to be a sizable amount of information on the internet that points towards the fact that Sean Connery was not allowing his likeness to be used as the reason that the other Bonds were not included. However, unfortunately, I couldn't find a reliable source to back these claims, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Coming in at number 5, we've got Miyamoto's comments. Carrying on from the blood spray, it's only fitting that we also cover Miyamoto's comments when he reacted to seeing the finished product from Rare. In an interview at Game City Festival, Martin Hollis, who is the director for GoldenEye, revealed the following. Bond is a violent franchise, and making that fit with Nintendo, which is very much a family-friendly brand, was a challenge. He went on to explain that towards the end of development, the team received a fax from Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto with a series of suggestions for the game. One point was that there was too much up-close killing. He found it a bit too horrible. I don't think I did anything with that input. The second point was he felt that the game was too tragic with all the killing. He suggested that it might be nice if at the end of the game you got to shake hands with all your enemies in the hospital. Instead of this, Hollis added a credit sequence into the game. It was very filmic, and the key thing was it underlined that the sequence essentially told people that this was not real killing. So that's why at the end of the game, if you've ever wondered, you have a sequence that plays out with different characters as if they were the cast of a movie. A very interesting little detail indeed. Coming in at number 4, we have the fact that it wasn't even supposed to be a 3D game at all. In an interview with Now Gamer, Carl Hilton recalls the following. I started in Rare in 1994 October, and they had me modeling cars and weapons to see if I could do it for no particular game. Martin Hollis wandered in. He tended to float around and said he was leading a team to do a Bond game. I'd been highlighted as somebody who might be interested, and of course I was. But at the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh god, a film license. The previous ones had been a 2D RoboCop or Batman games, and they were generally awful. Initially, the intention was to do a 2D side-scrolling platformer for the SNES, a genre that Rare excelled at when they had produced the Donkey Kong Country series. But Hollis insisted that the game should be in 3D and produced for what was known at the time as the Ultra 64, which was still very much in development. Can you imagine what the James Bond game would have looked like on the SNES, or a world without Goldeneye on the Nintendo 64? Thankfully, Hollis had a lot of pull with Nintendo due to the success of different Rare titles, and they were not going to be producing those games for the SNES. Coming in at number 3, and probably most surprisingly, multiplayer wasn't even supposed to be in the game. Goldeneye came out August 23rd, 1997, and in an interview with Martin Hollis, Edge asked the following. How did 4-player mode come about? It's more accomplished than that of, say, Hexen 64, but was it added quite late in the day? To which Martin Hollis said the following. I suppose it was. It was probably about March or something when I had decided that it would be a very good idea despite the looming deadlines. Everyone was saying at the time that it wouldn't be any fun in split screen and it wouldn't be any good. And I was kind of listening to those remarks and believing them. But then they turned out to be completely false because if you're sitting besides 3 other people, you can shout and scream at them. You can see their reactions in a way that you can't when it's on a network. It is a shame that you need a big TV to get the most out of it though. Honestly, it's really hard to believe for me personally that it was March of 97 and they were still tuning and adding new things to the game, especially a feature as substantial as multiplayer. Coming in at number 2, the fascinating history of the Club. Goldeneye is famous for pioneering many elements of the multiplayer shooter genre, with a wide variety of weapons in the game to provide players with endless amusement. The history of each of these inclusions are interesting, but one particular gun stands head and shoulders above the rest: the Club. Goldeneye's most hated weapon. The Club has spawned numerous Facebook fan pages, forum posts, and even whole articles written completely about it. All of this because it was pretty much a garbage weapon. But honestly, don't take it from me. Martin Hollis, the game's director, when interviewed about the Club, said the following. There are very few characters in GoldenEye's main story that carry a club. In fact, the team considered it too disadvantageous even for the lowliest grunt. He went on to say, many of the guns are highly tuned, but the club was not one of them. There are a few scenarios in which it's possible to pick up 2 clubs and dual wield them. When you do so, it makes an awesome sound and feels fantastic. You think to yourself, oh yeah, I'm the until you actually try to shoot an enemy with the gun. And then you realize it's a bit like a noisy water pistol. Needless to say, if the game's director is saying that the Club is not good, then it probably isn't. But that's not all for the Club, as there is in fact one more interesting thing about the weapon: the name itself. You see, most guns in GoldenEye are named similarly to their real-world counterparts, with some slight changes. There are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part this holds true. For example, the RCP-90 submachine gun is based off the real-world FN-P90. The KF-7 is based off the AK-47. You get the idea. In the Klob's case, it was originally supposed to be named the Scorpion after its real-world counterpart, which is based off a Czechoslovakian submachine gun. However, Nintendo decided that there could potentially be some copyright issues and thus wanted all the guns in the game renamed. Throughout the game, it was then known as the Spider, and you can still find this name in the instructional manual of the game, although not all instruction manuals. An interview from Nintendo Everything with former Nintendo exec Ken Lubb provides more background information on the name changes. Ken said the following: "I took a luxurious weekend off from the game, and it was about 4 weeks from being done. I went to go visit my in-laws in Portland, and I called Rare on Saturday morning to talk to Martin. He said, 'We've got good news and we've got bad news. We're weeks away from launch. The game has to be done.' I'm like, 'Okay, what do you mean? Please tell me.' Received a letter from Nintendo Legal saying the name of the Spider had to be changed. It was a gun. If you have one of the first 600,000 or 700,000 copies of Goldeneye, your manual doesn't say Klob, it says Spider. We had already printed those manuals and didn't know that the Spider was actually a name of a paintball gun, and Nintendo didn't want to risk it. It obviously looks nothing like the gun, but that name's trademarked, so they wanted to change it. And we didn't have time to do a worldwide search. The name had to be unique. So Martin said, 'We named it after you. The people at Rare call me Klob, so we named it after you. Is that okay?' I was honored, and little did I know that the game was going to do great." Essentially, it's crazy for us to think that the game was so late into production for the name to be changed. So late that the manual itself had already been printed 600,000 times. So if you have a manual at home and you want to go check that out, you can actually see if you're one of the few, and I say few, but not super few, people that do indeed have one of the original copies and one of the earlier runs of the game. Coming in at number 1, we're going to be talking about Cradle. Now, many levels hold significance, and if there is enough interest, I will create a video based off the different levels in 007 and their histories, and maybe touch upon the guns and things like that, similarly to what I've done already in this video. But for the purpose of this video, let's talk about a very unique level. Cradle is the 18th and final mainline level in the game, featuring Bond's final showdown. Interestingly, this is based on the real-life Arecibo Observatory, which was used for the shoot of the Goldeneye film. In 2016, it was considered the largest radio telescope in the world. However, in 2020, the observatory unexpectedly collapsed. The site had been decommissioned already due to sustaining substantial damage from hurricanes and weather that made it pretty much impossible to repair without risk to construction workers or staff at the facility. And it's really unfortunate. You can see the video here of it just collapsing completely. Even though Cradle's real-life counterpart has gone, it will be forever immortalized in Goldeneye. But did you know that Cradle was originally supposed to be playable in multiplayer? It's true. It's able to be booted up in GameShark. However, you'll notice a few things. One, the frame rate absolutely tanks beyond life itself, and throwing weapons are running into unexpected colliders and often fall to the ground. Well, that's been it for today's video, and I hope you enjoyed this 8 things. If you liked it, then be sure to like and subscribe, follow the channel, things like that. If you'd like to see more about 007 Goldeneye, then be sure to let me know. Who knows, if this video does well, then I might do another 8 things, as there's pretty much a ton of things that I left out because of just how this video works, and I needed 8 things, and there was more than 8 things. And yeah, it's just kind of how this series works. Also, I'd like to thank user Catholic Controversy for the suggestion of throwing a sheet over me during recording in order to get cleaner audio while I'm on the move. Hopefully this works out better this time. You're actually going to be able to see this image here that you're seeing on screen. That's me right now. Yes. Anyways, I'm gonna go take a shower. It is really, really hot underneath this sheet.